You can't always call 911 during an emergency. When you're thousands of feet in the air, what do you do when there's a medical emergency? You pray there's a doctor on board. Sometimes the passengers are lucky to have doctors on board, and they have to do something drastic to save a life. Like when a doctor saved the life of a passenger by sucking his urine. November 19, 2019, Dr. Jang, faced with a critical medical emergency, embarked on a daring mission to save a man's life on a flight. Dr. Jang learned of the man's history of prostate enlargement. The situation was dire. The man's bladder, swollen and overloaded, posed an imminent threat. If left unattended, the bladder could rupture, leading to potentially fatal consequences. Hours away from any medical assistance, Dr. Jang turned to his resourcefulness and quick thinking. With nothing more than a portable oxygen mask, a syringe needle, a milk straw, and some tape, Dr. Jang created his own improvised medical device. He prepared to take matters into his own hands. Dr. Jang carefully punctured the man's bladder, creating a pathway for the trapped urine to escape. But the challenge was far from over. Without a proper instrument for extraction, Dr. Jang resorted to a method that would shock many, using his own mouth to suck out the urine. Even though Jang worked alone, thanks to his quick thinking, the man was kept stable until the plane safely touched down, allowing for immediate transfer to a hospital. Sometimes the doctor on board is lucky enough to have some trained help. During a Vueling domestic flight, the unexpected cry for help rang out loud in the plane. On VY 3068 from Malaga to Gran Canaria, an urgent plea echoed through the cabin. Any doctors or nurses on board, report immediately. A passenger was in dire need of medical assistance. Because they are trained in first aid, cabin crew know when the situation demands more than their skill set. This time, fate smiled upon the passenger. A doctor and a nurse were on board. The doctor and nurse worked together to save the sick woman who had collapsed in midair. The doctor and nurse managed to stabilize the woman. When the plane finally reached Gran Canaria Airport, the woman was safely transferred to the waiting emergency services. It was a stroke of luck that the emergency occurred when Gran Canaria was close by. However, had circumstances been different, the captain stood ready to make the call for an emergency landing like this next pilot had to do. January 14, 2024, on a routine flight from Kochi to Mumbai, Dr. Cyriac Abbey Phillips found himself in a sudden life or death situation 30,000 feet in the air. A passenger's oxygen levels dropped dangerously low, and his blood pressure was high. Dr. Phillips sprang into action, despite not using a stethoscope for over 3 years. The man, struggling to breathe, was given emergency treatment by the flight crew. Dr. Phillips stepped in to help, finding the man's oxygen level at a critical 36%. Using his stethoscope, he discovered the man's left lung was filled with water, a dangerous situation made worse by his history of dialysis. Time was running out. The man's blood pressure read 280/160, a severe case of high blood pressure. With the flight an hour away from landing, Dr. Phillips had to act fast to keep the man alive. He made a risky move, giving an injection into the man's muscles to help ease his condition. The flight crew assisted Dr. Phillips as he worked. Oxygen cylinders were provided, and they followed his instructions to stabilize the man as best they could. Finally, as the plane landed in Mumbai, the man was swiftly taken to the hospital by waiting emergency services. Dr. Phillips's quick thinking saved a life, but it's not as impressive as what happened on this JetBlue flight. January 6, 2018, two doctors, Matthew Stevenson and John Flanagan, on a JetBlue flight from Orlando to Jamaica, had to save a woman in distress. The incident started about 20 minutes into the flight, as an elderly woman began to struggle for breath. A nurse on board attempted to assist her, but to no avail. Without hesitation, Dr. Stevenson and Dr. Flanagan stepped forward, using the limited resources available to them on the plane. However, they improvised, using the oxygen tanks and airbags to help the woman. For 45 minutes, the two doctors tirelessly administered oxygen to the woman, fighting to keep her breathing until the plane made an emergency landing in Fort Lauderdale. At least this was an easy emergency, unlike this emergency which took 5 hours. January 4th, 2023, on a flight from the UK to India, Dr. Vishwaraj Vimala, a liver doctor from Birmingham, became a hero. While on his way with his mother back to their hometown, a fellow passenger suddenly collapsed in the aisle. The 43-year-old man went into cardiac arrest, with no prior medical history to hint at the sudden emergency. Dr. Vimala was off duty, but he rushed to the passenger's side. Without a pulse and not breathing, the situation was dire. To his surprise, the cabin crew had an emergency kit containing vital medication, with makeshift equipment gathered from fellow passengers, including a heart rate monitor and blood pressure machine. Dr. Vimala fought to stabilize the man for about an hour before he woke up. However, the passenger suffered a second cardiac arrest, pushing Dr. Vimala and the cabin crew to their limits. After nearly 2 hours without a pulse or proper blood pressure, and a total of 5 hours battling against the odds, the passenger was again awake as the aircraft finally landed in Mumbai. He was immediately transferred to emergency services. Dr. Vimala had to save one passenger twice, but the next doctor saved 2 different passengers on 2 different flights with the same airline. In 2 separate incidents aboard Air France flights, Dr. Vincent Liu Busquel, an anesthesiologist and intensivist from Nice, found himself in the unexpected role of a lifesaver. The first incident was during a flight from Paris to Bucharest. Dr. Liu Busquel attended to a passenger suffering from a stroke. Responding quickly, he contacted local emergency services, arranging for an ambulance upon landing to transfer the patient to a specialized medical facility. The second incident occurred on a 14-hour flight from Seoul to Paris aboard Air France, flight AF 267. Dr. Liu Busquel was called upon to assist a passenger who had collapsed, showing signs of a severe medical condition, possibly a massive pulmonary embolism or a compressive pneumothorax. However, he found the onboard medical kit lacking essential equipment for such emergencies. I needed to administer medication intravenously to improve the patient's condition. Unfortunately, the cabin crew, while incredibly supportive, struggled due to their unfamiliarity with medical terms. When I asked for a bandage, I received a bottle of mercurochrome, said Dr. Liu Busquel. The medical kit also lacked an essential injection port on the IV line, forcing him to improvise by manipulating the line and securing it with scotch tape. The blood glucose monitor failed to work, and the available medication was limited to adrenaline, which posed risks of adverse effects. Eventually, he managed to get the man stable with his impressive improvisation. But what's as impressive as using an Apple Watch to save a life? January 9th, 2002, Dr. Rashid Riaz, an NHS doctor from Hereford, found himself using a rather unexpected gadget to save an elderly woman in distress on a flight from Birmingham to Verona. Traveling for a ski holiday, Dr. Riaz was approached by cabin crew when the woman, in her 70s, began experiencing difficulty breathing. Stepping forward to help, he borrowed an Apple Watch from a flight attendant, using its health monitoring features. Speaking to the woman in her native language, Urdu, Dr. Riaz learned of her history of heart issues. Using the Apple Watch, he discovered her low oxygen saturation, a crucial insight into her condition. With the data from the watch in hand, he requested an onboard oxygen cylinder from the staff. For the remainder of the flight, Dr. Riaz monitored the woman's oxygen levels, ensuring she remained stable until they landed in Italy. The patient recovered swiftly, with assistance from medical staff upon arrival. It's impressive how he was able to save the elderly woman, but what about this doctor who saved a baby? He didn't just save a baby, he delivered a premature baby in the air. Meet Dr. Ibrahim. In October 2021, Inshad Ibrahim, an emergency department worker from Wrexham Mailer Hospital, Wales, found himself in an unexpected situation on a flight from London Heathrow to Kochi, India. Just 2 hours into the journey, the flight crew urgently asked, "Is there a doctor on board?" Maria Phillip, a pregnant woman, had gone into labor prematurely. She started experiencing pains shortly after takeoff. Inshad, who was traveling with his wife and 2 young children, volunteered immediately. Upon examination, they discovered Maria's water had broken. They quickly turned the section of the plane usually used for food preparation into an improvised delivery room with pillows and clothes. Half of the baby's head was already visible when they examined Maria. Eventually, Dr. Inshad delivered the baby safely. Despite the baby's small size, weighing just 2.4 lbs, The doctor pronounced the baby was okay. However, there was a tense moment when he didn't cry immediately after birth. Inshad gently tapped the baby's back, and after what felt like an eternity but was really 15 to 20 seconds, the newborn let out a cry of life. Passengers offered their clothes to keep the baby warm. The plane made an emergency landing in Frankfurt, where Maria and baby Sean Michael were rushed to the hospital for checks. Thanks to Dr. Inshad, the baby turned out fine. On the other hand, it took 5 doctors to save this 2-year-old with a heart condition. August 2023. 5 doctors from Delhi's All India Institute of Medical Sciences, AIIMS, became unexpected lifesavers on a Vistara Airlines flight from Bengaluru to Delhi. The urgent distress call came as a 2-year-old girl, recently out of open-heart surgery in Bengaluru, suffered a life-threatening crisis mid-air. The child, unconscious and pulseless, required immediate attention. The doctors sprang into action. With basic tools like oxygen cylinders, chest compressions, and the plane's first aid kit, the doctors embarked on a 45-minute race against time to save her life. The child's condition remained critical as they worked to revive her. They even had to intubate her to aid her breathing. The doctors requested the flight to divert to Nagpur, Maharashtra, for emergency medical assistance. Upon landing, they ensured the child's vital signs were stable before handing her over to a pediatrician. All the doctors so far have improvised nicely and saved people's lives, but this one takes it up a notch. On May 23, 1995, Dr. Angus Wallace and Dr. Tom Wong found themselves faced with an emergency at 35,000 feet aboard a British Airways flight from Hong Kong to London, when fellow passenger Paula Dixon, 39, reported severe chest pains and difficulty breathing. The doctors were forced into action. Paula had been in an accident earlier, causing pain in her arm, yet she boarded the flight. The situation escalated as the flight went on, with Paula's condition worsening. Eventually, the captain was forced to call for medical assistance, and Dr. Wallace and Dr. Wong responded. With limited resources available, the doctors devised a solution to save Paula's life. With only a coat hanger, tubing, adhesive tape, and brandy, they set to work. Wallace, an orthopedic surgeon, knew that Paula's collapsed lung required immediate attention. With a small amount of local anesthetic from the first aid kit to ease Paula's pain, Wallace made a careful incision in her chest. Using the coat hanger inside the tubing, Wallace inserted it into Paula's chest to relieve the pressure. Once the tubing was in place, secured with tape, they improvised a valve with a bottle of water to prevent air from re-entering her chest cavity. The makeshift chest drain worked, allowing Paula to breathe more easily for the remainder of the flight. Upon landing at Heathrow Airport, she was promptly taken to a nearby hospital.